All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Faulkner. I'm an intern here at Village Core. I do these daily sessions where I either talk about a tech topic or I interview people with interesting stories about what they've done with their lives and what they've done with their families. So today I'm joined here by Cathy Philips, the author of A Mapmaker's Daughter. Um, and so today we'll be talking a little bit about her book and her experience with her whole family and all that. So let's get into it. Cathy, I'm very happy to have you here today.
I'm very glad to be here.
All right.
All
So let's begin. So can you explain a little bit about what a map maker is and how your dad played a role in this?
My father was a cartographer, which is someone who does surveying at different mountains and valleys and things like that for maps.
Yeah.
And a lot of people use, GPS now, but back in the day, paper maps were what was used. And he worked for a company called the U.S. Geological Survey, which still exists. The cartography department does not anymore, because a lot of technology has kind of taken that role over. Although the accuracy, they do know that the accuracy of the map making done by a person is just as accurate.
Very interesting.
I'm going to touch on it here. I'm going to go ahead and read the first section, just first part of this, because that will more clearly give an indication of what the history is. And in starting this tribute, I've gone back to thinking of how a map maker would make a map. A map maker, we already did this, is called a cartographer. Maps in the day were made by hand and included the study of topography, which describes land features within a field of geoscience and planetary science. Surveyors study, measure, and map these features like mountains and valleys. So that is what he did. One of the highlights of this whole thing is living on a mountain. And I grew up on Lookout Mountain in Colorado.
And how was that experience growing up on a mountain?
That is one of the best memories and best things I could have ever lived. And it still is a highlight in my heart and forever will be. He built a house there out of a burnout, and it took a long time to find the pictures for the house because they had the records mixed up in the place where we lived. We lived in a small community, mountain circle community. Yeah. Skiing is one of my all-time favorite things. The Lookout Mountain is at about 7,700 feet up, which not a lot of people experience that. And
I kind of wanted to ask you here, kind of what inspired you to kind of write this memoir?
This was a dream that I have always had. And my mother had died in 1997. And my stepmother had died before my dad, who died in 2016 at the age of 91. And part of the reason for this book is that we lived on the West Coast and the entire rest of the family lived on the East Coast. And there was kind of a misconnection, I'll say, because my grandparents had all died by the time I was 12.
Mhm.
All of my cousins were, I was a year and a half old and they were all 10, 11, 12 years old. So I really didn't have a lot of connection there. And to go and see them, even when they were alive, my grandparents were alive, was a big deal because you had to fly across the country in order to do that. And
And was
the
that,
other one, oh,
sorry, I was going to ask you, was that kind of challenging being separated, being on one part of the country and, having your family on another part?
it was. I don't think at the time I thought that much about it because my mother always had us occupied, doing things and going places. And then my dad would, go every 6 months he'd travel and then he'd come home
Mhm.
and there was a lot of activity. We did of um, a lot of camping and a lot of different activities. So I don't think I felt it at the time. I did later on because not only had my mother died, but my dad and my stepmother and my brother. So my family circle got very, very small.
Yeah.
And we have two daughters who were married, and that's a joy. But we don't really have, other than that, everybody, even on Brad's side, are not here. And so keeping his memory alive, just the legacy that he had, um, became very important to me. I'm part of it was after my mother had died, the girls were 8 and 14 at the time. And I always wanted to share the best parts of her life with them. And they were always at an age where they didn't really want to hear more.
Mhm.
They'd heard those stories before. And Brad finally said, write it down
Yeah.
and include more than they realize is there. And hopefully as they get older, they will appreciate the legacy.
Yeah. And throughout your book, kind of the chapters are the chapters in your life. So
Yes.
can you speak on kind of, the process of writing this memoir and like trying to go
What,
through the chapters of your life?
yeah, what I did was I took a piece of paper and put all of the different things that had a special place um, in my heart and my memories, and wrote them down in 2 or 3 word segments. So I had a section for my mom and my dad, and living on a mountain, Christmas traditions, home traditions, all the different elements. And then I wrote underneath that, I filled in the information that was a part of the memory.
And you
And
mentioned some family traditions. Do you guys still do those family traditions nowadays?
we don't, not in the same way. There were traditions that were very unique. And I can mention a couple of them. One of them was in going to me and my brother. He was 4 years younger than I was. And we used to go to sleep listening to records. So my dad had a collection of 333 LPs, which to this day we still have. And we would take turns choosing what to listen to go to sleep to, which made it fun. It also, nobody argued, there was no reason for any of that because it was a very unique, something different. We kind of took it for granted, but today a lot of people don't even know what a 33 LP vinyl record is.
Yeah.
We also had special things like Christmas time.
Mhm.
where we would have we had a tree downstairs, and they had a special routine every year to have us stay in bed as long as possible before they got downstairs first. And we all had stockings, and my mother had hand knit them. And my mom, her stocking was a silk stocking, and then my dad had one. And so what they would do is you had to go to sleep. You wanted to go to sleep because they would take the stockings after that time and fill them and pin them to the end of your bed, to the end of our beds, with a big diaper pin, which it's just unique.
Yeah.
And it became a part of the story that just, I think, today seems so unreal to have occurred. Which is why I thought, why not put this down? Because some of these things people have never even heard of before.
Yeah.
And one of the things my mom always had in the stocking was she would always take an orange and put cloves in it and stud it with cloves so that it would make a bureau drawer. It would make a sachet, basically a homemade sachet for a bureau drawer.
Wow.
And we had bird feeders too. We had we have a handmade binocular case made out of leather that was engraved, and we always looked at birds, did a lot of bird watching and research on birds. And the kind of, it's just a field that, I don't know, to have a dad as a map maker was just so unusual.
Yeah.
It really was. I mean, kids didn't go to school and say, my dad makes maps, without everybody kind of looking at you like, okay, what's that?
Yeah.
And who does that? He living on the mountain living was another section that meant a lot. We had high altitude cooking, which means you change parts of a recipe in order to account for if it's over 3,000 feet. And so I would learn. We had a easy bake oven, I think, or one of them, and my mother would teach me how to bake using high altitude cooking.
Wow.
And just one of the things in putting this together also was there was a lot of research into my parents' history.
Yeah.
My mother did very beautiful scrapbooks, and on the first page are a lot of newspaper clippings from a friend of hers, whose name is Bunny. And she put on there all these clippings that she found to tell my mother how to catch a guy in 1947. Well, I didn't realize that they actually met in 1946.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know, a lot about my dad's jobs, prior to the U.S. Geological Survey and those related jobs. But when they were young, and when he was in World War II in the Battle of the Bulge, and when they got married and where they first lived, and all of the research, I had bits and pieces, but I didn't have the whole picture. Because the family tree, we have a lot of holes that needed to be filled, and we still have some that we are working on. Brad did a lot of a lot of the pictures. We scanned many slides, the old paper slides and metal cased slides that we inherited that I didn't know what all was in there. They loved to vacation. They loved to go horseback riding. They loved camping. They loved a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of get-togethers with friends. And this just filled in a lot of the gaps in terms of where they went and when they went there, and that really helped to fill in.
Yeah, was it very like interesting to learn about your parents' past and leading up to their future now?
Yes, very much so. I knew that he had worked in certain places, but I didn't know the dates. I
Mhm.
didn't know the timing. I didn't know when their first date was, and the fact that it was a frat party. And frat parties back then were a lot more classic, than frat things today,
Yeah.
which have gotten a little, which are very different.
Yeah.
And their first dances and pictures of them, and just a lot of fun.
And kind of was it hard to relive these memories, or was it kind of an enjoyable experience to look back and say, I did this with my family, and here's what my dad and my mother did at this certain point, and here's how much fun they had.
It was hard in a way that I missed them.
Yeah.
And I mean, my dad's birthday, his 99th birthday is coming up this next week. He would be 99. And there are questions that I would love to ask them,
Hmm.
even now, that they're not here to ask. But I had shared that dream with him, and it was to go ahead and do this, and then to have the dream actually be fulfilled was absolutely awesome. And there's a whole section that goes into when Brad and I got married, and our lives beyond the initial history and work of my mom and dad. And I had been ill for quite a while, and Brad went back and did a timeline from 1974 in the 70s back to up to 2020. So he helped to fill in some of the things that we did as a family, and the timing of when we did them, so that I could come up with the chapter headings.
Wow.
In a way that would make sense.
Yeah.
Because the girls, I was always there for the girls, but I was not physically always able to be there.
Yeah.
Brad was, but they, I wanted them to know that, a lot of this is for them.
Yeah. And speaking of your husband, Brad, Brad mentioned before to me and to other people that you chose to sell your book through Lulu rather than Amazon. Can you explain kind of your decision behind that?
Yeah, we were looking for a place where we could publish it, but where there wasn't the risk of having somebody else change or try to change the truth
Mm.
of his legacy. And I know a lot of, and it's not a big book, it's only 60 pages, a lot of memoirs that people do tend to be bigger.
Mhm.
But I really wanted to keep it close. So that we could um, so that it could be published,
Mhm.
but still be in our hands in terms of the control of how it's used, or and so that it wouldn't be misused.
Yeah. And do you have any advice for any aspiring memoir writers? Are there any lessons or tips that you learned through your own experience when writing this memoir?
Um, One is to learn how to use a laptop, which Brad is a lot more experienced at than I am.
Yeah.
And then just to make small notes of things that were important to you and write them down, and then take each section. I found going through and doing titles of things like mountain living or that are in here. There are 21 of them, 21
Mhm.
chapters. And doing that helped me to be able to figure out what to put in there,
Yeah.
what to put in each chapter, so that I wasn't thinking of all of the material and then wondering where to put it.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we are running out of time here, but we have just about 5 minutes for anybody who wants to ask you any questions. So is there anybody in the chat or raise your hand or anything if you want to ask Cathy a few questions?
Hi, Cathy. Can I
Hi.
ask a question?
Yes.
Well, I was really intrigued that the recipes have to be altered at for the high altitude. So I think that should be your next book. How to cook when you're at a higher altitude.
Yeah. Yeah.
To that end, do you have plans of writing other books?
I have a lot of poems that I have done over the years, and I would like to maybe put something together. My mother actually wrote a book of poetry, a small one that was published. But I would like to kind of branch off of that and um, add to it.
Yeah, very
Well,
interesting.
I can't wait to read that.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'm learning.
Are there any other people who have questions? I'm guessing not. So thank you so much, Cathy, for being here with me today. It's been an honor listening to your story and also reading your story about your life and everything that you have done up till now. So thank you very much for being here with me today.
You're welcome. Can I add one thing that maybe we can insert
Yeah.
afterward? And that was we had a dog that named Suki, and we had gotten her when she was 16 months old, and I was 16 months old. And she lived to be 16. And we never knew it until after she died, that she went from house to house all the way around the mountain cul-de-sac every single day at a specific time and got a treat.
Aw.
And they told us, and they said, yeah, she's here at 7:30 every morning. And all I could think was, wow, they must not have been bad. They must
Yeah.
not have been that unhealthy if you live to be 16.
Yeah. Well, thank you so
And
much for this.
yeah, and I hope that the rest of the fill-ins, if people get a chance to read the book, will give them a little more insight.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank
of
you.
course, this has been a Village Core presentation, and I do these every single day. just like this, either interviewing somebody very interesting or doing tech reviews and stuff like that. So, or tech topics and stuff like that. So if you do miss a meeting, they are all uploaded to YouTube, and you can go find them there, or you can go on the Village Core website and you can find more events just like this one or different ones that might spark your interest on the Village Core website. So yeah, that's really all I have today. Thank you so much again. All right. So
Thank you.